By now, most whiskey tubers have done a best of video for 2023, and these often include really limited release, hard to find and rare, expensive whiskies. Hell, that was half my list. So today I'm recommending 5 whiskies for you to try in 2024. Dependable, core range whiskies that are readily available in most countries that the distilleries continue to produce. Hey guys, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. I'm a whiskey enthusiast and I love all things whiskey. But taste is subjective and there's a lot of different whiskies out there. So whether you consider yourself a connoisseur or you're just looking to understand more about whiskey, let's explore it all together. If you haven't already subscribed, hit that button now. I put up new videos every week. You can also follow me over on Instagram. What I'm going to show you today is 5 of the highest rated whiskies I tried in 2023 that are core range whiskies. A core range whiskey is a whiskey that the distillery produces and releases directly and continues to do so year after year. So they should be readily available and usually at a reasonably affordable price. They're not limited releases, special batches, single casks, or travel exclusives. They are whiskies made in volume, so you can count on them to be accessible, affordable, and likely able to be found for many years to come. I've also kept this to internationally available whiskies. So there's some fantastic core range whiskies that are being made here in Australia now, but you're probably not going to find them in Kentucky or Dublin or Edinburgh or wherever you're watching this from. But I would happily recommend those Australian whiskies, so let me know if you want to see that video. Coming in at number 5 was the Classic Laddie from Bruichladdich Distillery. The Classic Laddie is meant to showcase the classic, floral, unpeated house style of the distillery. Now, an unpeated whiskey is kind of unusual for an Islay distillery, but with Bruichladdich, they wanted the Classic Laddie to really draw the focus onto the grain itself. Some people might actually argue with the Classic Laddie being on this list when I'm saying core range, and it only just scraped by for me too. And that's because the Classic Laddie, they even admit on their website that the Classic Laddie is a little bit different each year. And that's because they're using, the focus is on the grain itself. So because grain is going to be different based on the seasons and how one year is going to be hotter or colder than the next, the whiskey itself does taste a tiny bit different each year. Bruichladdich Distillery is actually renowned for being very traditional yet eco-friendly. They are one of the few distilleries in Scotland that's actually B Corp certified, and they're big on where their barley is grown. So a lot of their whiskies are released actually stating which region that barley came from. I included the Classic Laddie in this list because it is considered their signature bottling, and they do release it year on year with relative consistent flavours. And it is probably the most consistent thing that comes out of Bruichladdich each year, and it is always high quality and readily available. The kind of flavours you can expect are oatmeal biscuit, butter, vanilla, and even faint grassy notes. It's quite a thick, robust whiskey, and the ABV is high enough that adding a couple of drops of water will change up those flavours that you're getting as well. It's always released at 50%, non-chill filtered, no colour added, with a pretty good proportion of it coming from ex-bourbon casks, and it retails in Australia for about $120. The next whiskey might be a bit of a surprise because I'm usually more of a single malt drinker, but I'm open-minded enough to explore other whiskies and admit when they're good. So number 4 is actually a Kentucky straight bourbon from Rabbit Hole Distillery, the Derringer Double Barrel. The Rabbit Hole Distillery was actually started by somebody who considered himself a Scotch drinker, and trying bourbon for the first time considered it going down the proverbial rabbit hole into a whole new world of whiskey. So his bourbons do have some single malt influence. If you want to go down that rabbit hole of a story, you can watch this video here. But the Derringer Double Barrel has a mash bill of 65% corn, 25% wheat, and 10% malted barley. Initially aged in virgin American white oak, but then finished in Pedro Jimenez barrels.
You spelled virgin wrong. Virgin.
The result is a bourbon with a wonderful sherry notes on the nose that balances out on the palate to have flavours like creme brulee, toasted malt, vanilla, and this wonderful dry finish. It's a non-age statement whiskey, but to be called Kentucky Straight, it has to be at least 2 years of age. It's non-chill filtered and bottled at 46.5%. Now, as consistent as this whiskey is, and that it's even considered a core range whiskey for the distillery, as a whole, the distillery actually advertises that they never do any whiskies with more than 15 barrels at a time. So they're creating the same flavors, but they're not using anything more than 15 casks to produce that. So you could argue that it is small batch, but it's classed as part of their core range. So I'd actually be interested to know if anyone's tasted any variances in flavor from batch to batch. And fortunately, this is now available in Australia, though it is a little bit pricey at $277. The next whiskey comes from a new distillery for me, because it's actually a relatively new whiskey distillery in the Lowlands region of Scotland. Number 3 is the Kingsbarns Balcomie. This is a single malt whiskey made from locally sourced Fife barley, 100% aged in Oloroso sherry butts. So it's a sherry bomb, but it's a nicely balanced fruity sherry bomb. On the nose you get sultanas, cinnamon, dark chocolate and berries, while the palate gives you pineapple, orange, even some apricot and some hazelnut on the finish. It's a non-age statement, non-chill filtered, natural colour, bottled at 46%. You can get it for around $130 in Australia, but shop around because there seems to be quite a range in pricing depending on which shops you look at. Number 2 is an old favourite of mine, Aberlour A'bunadh cask strength. This is another sherry bomb, this time from the Speyside region. Once again, this is 100% matured in Oloroso sherry butts, and it has flavours of sultana, fig, plum and fruitcake. Being cask strength, it's a big, bold whiskey with plenty of mouthfeel, but you can change the flavors up and mellow it out by adding a few drops of water if that's what you prefer. Honestly, this is a whiskey that makes me just want to sit by a fire in a cold country and sip away. It's a non-age statement, non-chill filtered, natural color, bottled at a whopping 61.3%. It retails for about $150 in Australia and it is well worth it. I highly recommend this whiskey for me, as a gift for me. I highly recommend you buy this whiskey and give it to me as a gift. But seriously, this is a cracker of a whiskey. Finally, and some will disagree, but the number 1 core range whiskey that I had last year that you should too is Talisker Portree. I'll admit that part of the reason why this one scores so highly for me is sentimental reasons. Jess and I were lucky enough to visit the distillery when we were in Scotland and we absolutely loved the whiskey. We would spend the day exploring the Isle of Skye and then finishing the day with this dram. It is always on our shelf. But the whiskey itself is a wonderful combination of sweet, grain, smoke and salt. You have shortbread flavour notes combined with light peat, there's sweetness that comes from port casks, and there's a salty flavour that comes from the barrels being aged right by the sea. As delectable as this combination of flavours makes it to drink this whiskey neat, it pairs wonderfully with food. So if you're eating something sweet, the salt contrasts beautifully. If you're eating meat, that smokiness has a wonderful effect. And if you're having cheese, the smoke and the biscuity notes go really well with that too. It's a food pairing all-rounder. And if you're sharing it with a non-whiskey drinker, there's no one flavour that's too much. It's not too sweet, the peat isn't as confronting as an Ardbeg, and the saltiness is well balanced. Now the stats are, it's a non-age statement single malt bottled at 45.8%. It is chill filtered and may have colour added. And that's the only thing I don't like, because I can only imagine how having those natural oils could add more of like a buttery element there. It's been aged in European and American oak heavily charred casks and then finished in port barrels. It is technically a Highland whiskey, but some people do consider the islands off the coast of Scotland to almost be their own region. It's quite a contentious thing and I'll probably end up doing a video on it at some point. And this is another one where the price ranges quite a bit depending on the retailer. So in Australia you can pick it up for anywhere from $120 to $155, but if you're buying it, do shop around because $20 here and there eventually adds up to another bottle of whiskey. So that's my top 5 core range whiskies for you to try in 2024. I love finding good core range whiskies because they're dependable. If you saw my top 5 whiskies of 2023, by the time I posted that video, most of those whiskies were already sold out. And that's because they were limited releases, single casks and independent bottlings. But with core range whiskies, they're always available. If you're new to whiskey and you're just starting out, I know that a lot of those independent bottlings and really expensive whiskies can seem quite daunting. So these core range whiskies, they're always going to be available and I really do recommend giving them a go. If you already have a favorite core range whiskey that you always restock in your house, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, enjoy what's in your glass and slange.